Arya Rosethorn sat on a low wooden stool in the corner of the dimly lit chamber, her slender fingers absently twisting the hem of her faded cerulean gown. She was 16, old enough to remember the soft hum of her mother's lullabies on summer nights by the riverbank, yet young enough to still believe in the fragile promise of freedom. Now, orphaned and under the care of her ruthless Aunt Marisol, she'd been pressed into service at the Silverlight brothel for nearly a year. Each evening she donned her mask of serenity, stepping into the smoky hall where wealthy patrons gathered, eager for song and spectacle. Her voice, clear as dew on a spider's web and aching with unspoken sorrow, had earned her the nickname Songbird of Silverlight. From the first moment she had timidly opened her mouth to sing, the whole room had fallen silent. The clinking of glasses, the murmur of conversation, even the crackle of the great hearth's flames, all had settled into attentive stillness. She hadn't known then that her talent would be the only thing preventing Aunt Marisol from selling her off entirely. But a promise was a promise, and Marisol had vowed that for every additional coin Arya earned, she would inch closer to buying her freedom. A cruel incentive, for no matter how many nights Arya sang her heart out, the tally never seemed to shrink. In the flickering glow of lantern light, Arya often found herself staring at the heavy iron bars of the window, imagining a life beyond these gray stone walls. In her dreams she walked barefoot through lavender fields, the air heady with the scent of blossoms, sunlight dancing on golden hills. Sometimes, in the hush before dawn, she'd catch a glimpse of open sky through a gap in the curtain and whisper a silent vow: someday, she would flee this gilded cage. Tonight, the hall felt more oppressive than usual. The heavy oak doors swung open with a resonant thud, and a hush rippled through the assembled guests. Lord Bartholomew Grimshaw, nicknamed the Iron Boar for his corpulent frame and ruthless dealings, had arrived. His reputation was as dark as the obsidian cufflinks he favored, and his presence sent a ripple of nervous anticipation through Marisol's ladies. His burly hand clamped down on Arya's wrist when she stepped forward at Marisol's bidding, and the surge of cold dread clashed with the heat of her rising panic. "Sing for me, Arya," he rumbled, his voice thick like spilled honey laced with vinegar. "I've heard you're the finest bird in this sorry aviary." He buried his blunt fingers in her wrist, pulling her toward a curtained alcove where only his private chamber awaited. Marisol's practiced smile was as false as the jewels she peddled. She would collect the coin for this exclusive performance and log it meticulously into her ledger, all while puffing her chest with the pride of a successful merchant. Arya swallowed hard but refused to let her voice quaver. She plastered a gentle smile onto her lips, brushing her palm discreetly over her other wrist to steady the tremor. Inhaling a quiet breath, she stepped into the alcove. The heavy curtain fell behind her with a soft sigh, sealing her fate in silence. Beyond that barrier, she could still hear the distant hum of conversation and laughter, but here it was muted, as though her very song had unplugged their world. She lifted her chin, shoulders straight, and when she opened her mouth, a single crystalline note floated out, pure, haunting, and full of longing. It trembled through the dusty air like a candle's flame wobbling against the dark. As she shifted into the rich verses of an old folk ballad one her mother had sung to her on starry nights, her voice found new strength, rising and falling with the echo of memory. Each word was infused with tears she dared not shed. Behind the curtain, Lord Bartholomew's gruff exterior softened for the briefest heartbeat. his heavy brow furrowed, and he leaned forward, as if trying to capture the notes before they could slip away. Arya sang of a maiden lost at sea, of salt-swept cliffs and the promise of dawn, weaving a tapestry of sorrow that only deepened the hush around her. She felt threads of the past and future intertwining, as if the song itself was a key to unlock a door she had long forgotten. Unbeknownst to her, a stranger watched from the edge of the gathering Leonardo Windermere, scion of a respected merchant family. He had slipped into the brothel under the pretense of business, but now he found himself drawn inexplicably to the voice emerging from that curtained alcove. He leaned against a marble column, the flicker of torchlight casting sharp angles across his thoughtful face. Leonardo's heart pounded in rhythm with Arya's melody. He recognized a rare spirit in her song, one that defied confinement and yearned for flight. When the final note trembled into silence, a hush reigned that felt thicker than any applause. In that pregnant pause, Arya dared to glance behind her. Through the narrow opening of the drape, she saw Lord Bartholomew's stern profile softened by awe. Beyond him, the guests leaned forward, eyes bright with wonder. And there standing apart was Leonardo, his gaze locked onto hers with an intensity that set her pulse racing. Marisal's voice cut sharply through the stillness. "Lord Grimshaw is pleased beyond words, my lord," she declared, bowing low. The room erupted into polite applause, but for Arya, the sound felt distant, as though it belonged to someone else's life. She retrieved her trembling hand from Lord Bartholomew's grasp and stepped back into the light of the main hall. Each footfall echoed in her skull like a drumbeat of destiny. As she rejoined the lineup of performers, her heart swelled with a strange mixture of dread and hope. Tonight, she had sung her truth. Somewhere beyond these walls, a new chapter of her story was stirring into being, one that might, if fate was kind, lead her back to that open sky she dreamed of. And someone out there had heard. But for now, she was Arya Rosethorn, Songbird of Silverlight, and her first note of hope echoed through the dark. The flicker of candlelight danced across Arya's reflection in the polished ebony mirror as she prepared for sleep, heart still racing from the evening's performance. Behind her, the heavy drapes of her small chamber at the Silverlight brothel rustled, and Aunt Marisal's silhouette appeared in the doorway, framed by the hallway's dim glow. "Count yourself fortunate, child," Marisal rasped, brushing past Arya to inspect the ledger resting on the battered dressing table. The heavy book lay open to the night's receipts tallies in scratchy ink that seemed to mock Arya's every hope of freedom. "Lord Grimshaw's coins will cover your debts for another fortnight. Keep singing like an angel, and we might even refresh your contract." Marisal's words dripped with false goodwill. Arya stiffened, recalling the cruel calculus that kept her imprisoned. Every night of song, no matter how soul-wrenching, added more line items to this ledger, which never seemed to shrink. She forced a polite nod and sank onto the stool. Marisal's footsteps retreated, leaving Arya alone with her thoughts and that damned book. Outside the window, the city of Silverlight lay silent under a velvet sky. Narrow lanes wound between high stone buildings, lanterns glowing like fireflies. Arya pressed her palm against the cool glass, dizzy with longing. How she yearned to taste that forbidden freedom just once, to slip through the cobblestone alleys and vanish among merchant caravans, or lose herself in the forest of whispering oaks beyond the city. walls. Her reverie was broken by a faint knock on the door. Whirling, she grabbed her simple shawl. "Who is it?" A hushed voice answered, "Leonardo Windermere. I must speak with you." Leonardo. The memory of his gaze, intense, compassionate, had haunted her since the performance. She hesitated a moment before unlocking the door, conscience fluttering like a wounded bird. There he stood, cloaked in midnight blue with the hood pushed back to reveal his dark hair and determined eyes. "Forgive me for intruding," he whispered, closing the door behind him. "I overheard the tally tonight. You've no chance of ever earning your freedom at this rate." Arya sank onto the rumpled bed, barely trusting her voice. "I know. My debts multiply faster than I can sing." Leonardo knelt beside her, producing a slender strip of parchment sealed with crimson wax. "I have something that belongs to you, Marisol's contract ledger. I liberated it from her safe." Her breath caught. "You did what?" He pressed the parchment into her trembling hand. "I can't stand by while you remain trapped here. Read it carefully. Every forbidden dance, every private performance, every favor. If the city guard sees this, they'll realize you've been enslaved illegally. Your debt is a farce." Tears pricked her lashes. "Why would you risk so much?" He offered a rueful half-smile. "Because your song brought me back to life tonight. I've never heard anything so pure." Beyond the thin walls, footsteps echoed. Marisol's patrols were relentless. Leonardo's eyes flicked to the door. "I've arranged for us to meet at the abandoned watchtower by Moonridge Bridge tonight. I'll have a carriage waiting. Follow me, and I'll see you to safety." Arya gripped the parchment to her heart. Every line felt like a key turning in a lock. "But your family, if they discover you've defied them." He rose, brushing back a lock of hair. "My father cares more about his trading routes than my actions. Besides, he's been displeased with Marisol ever since that scandal at the somber ball 3 months ago." He paused, lowering his voice. "He lost heavily when Silverlight's governor banned imported wine. Marisol was his partner in that venture. She's been skirting debts ever since." Arya's plan formed in her mind: create a scenario where Marisol's fraud and Lord Grimshaw's illicit deals were exposed, forcing them to flee or face justice. If she could buy a handful of hours, Leonardo's carriage, and that steward's cloak in the next room, she might slip away. She nodded, resolve igniting. "I'll be there. But we must move carefully. Marisol's eyes are everywhere." Leonardo pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Be ready at midnight. I'll return to the courtyard and signal with 3 torch flares." With that, he retreated into the shadows, leaving Arya to prepare the most daring performance of her life. The seconds ticked past like drips of poison. Arya gathered her meager belongings, a worn cloak, the ledger in her pocket, and her mother's silver locket the only heirloom she still possessed. She fastened her long hair into a tight braid, muffling any stray notes of song that might betray her identity. Midnight came swathed in mist. From her small barred window, Arya saw the silhouette of Leonardo raising 3 torches atop the brothel's roof. Below, the courtyard was deserted save for a single stable boy snoring against a weathered post. Arya slipped from her window onto the narrow ledge, heart pounding so hard she feared it might betray her location. Carefully, she edged along the stonework, using every inch of the building's exterior as a stepping stone, until she dropped lightly into the courtyard. Leonardo caught her arm. "Easy, easy." He guided her around the corner, where a shabby horse-drawn carriage waited, its driver hidden beneath a heavy hood. The faint clip-clop of hooves alerted Arya to the approaching doom, and Marisol, pacing with a lantern, searching for her missing star performer. Leonardo ducked behind a stack of crates, pulling Arya down. Marisol's lantern beam swept the courtyard, illuminating crates, barrels, even the stable boy's slumped shoulders, but not the 2 fugitives. Arya held her breath as Marisol's voice cut through the stillness. "Arya, where have you slipped off to? Marisol'll skin you alive if you vanish on a debtor's night." Leonardo tightened his grip on Arya's hand. "When she's turned the corner, we run." As Marisol lumbered away, muttering curses, Arya allowed herself a triumphant smile. Leonardo led her to the carriage. He whispered instructions to the hooded driver, then helped Arya inside and mounted beside her. The carriage lurched forward, its wheels crunching over cobblestone slick with dew. They rode in silence at first. Arya clutched the ledger against her heart. "I don't know if I'll ever get used to this freedom." Leonardo reached across and squeezed her hand. "We'll find a way. There's an uncle of mine in the border town of Willowmere. He's a magistrate. He can validate your ledger and set you free at dawn." Arya exhaled, the tension seeping away. "And Lord Grimshaw? How do we shield him from Marisol's wrath?" Leonardo's gaze grew steely. "We'll do what we must. You sang your truth tonight, now the world will hear it in every ledger line. Marisol and Grimshaw have their secrets, but justice has its own melody." As Silverlight spires receded in the distance, Arya let her head fall against Leonardo's shoulder. For the first time since she'd been sold into this gilded prison, her future was unwritten and the first page gleamed with possibility. If only she could hold the faith until Willowmere's gates rose at dawn. The wheels of the carriage rattled over the cobblestones as the dawn moon dipped below the eastern hills. Arya pressed her forehead against Leonardo's shoulder, half asleep, but her mind buzzed with anxious questions. Beyond the window, the dark shapes of Silverlight's rooftops gave way to mist-shrouded fields, and the distant outlines of the watchtower at Moonridge Bridge loomed like a silent sentinel. Leonardo stirred the hooded driver with a gentle nudge. "We're close," he murmured. The driver cracked the reins, and the horses slowed to a cautious trot. "Once we reach the bridge, we'll disembark and make our way along the northern road." It's less traveled and should help us avoid any patrols still searching for you. Arya swallowed. Every nerve in her body ached with exhaustion and excitement. What if they've sent riders after us? He gripped her hand. I've taken care to avoid the main roads. Marisol's reach is sharp, but she doesn't know this path. And Willowmere lies on the far side of the Silver Peak Mountains. That terrain will deter all but the most determined pursuers. A sudden crack in the night air made both of them sit up. 4 dark figures on horseback surged from a side lane and bore down upon the carriage. In a single fluid motion, Leonardo stood and bellowed, "Hold fast." The driver whipped the horses into a gallop, but the bandits were quicker. 2 of them gained on the left wheel, brandishing steel-tipped spears. Arya's heart pounded. She tried to slip the ledger deeper into her cloak. From the corner of her eye, she spotted Leonardo unsheathing a slender rapier, an heirloom from his father's travels. One rider hurled a net at the horses, and it tangled the carriage's axle with a metallic snap. The horses screamed and stumbled, the carriage lurched to a halt. Without hesitation, Leonardo vaulted from the carriage, blade flashing in the torchlight. Arya hesitated for only a heartbeat before sliding after him. The northern road lay open behind them, a ribbon of fog and moonlit prairie. "Run!" Leonardo ordered, slashing at the leading bandit's net thrower. Sparks of steel against steel rang out as he parried. Arya sprinted, clutching the ledger to her chest. Her feet pounded the gravel as the remaining 3 riders circled. A sharp pain stabbed her ankle as she stumbled over an uneven stone, and the ledger flew from her grasp. "No!" she cried, but Leonardo's voice cut through the chaos. "Go, don't look back." Arya hurtled past him, tears stinging her eyes as she stumbled into the chill mist. Behind her rose a cacophony of snarls and cavalry boots on gravel. She tasted fear in every breath. For a moment she considered turning to help, but the weight of the ledger, her only proof of freedom, pressed too urgently against her heart. She pressed on, branches clawing at her skirts as she veered into a narrow deer path that wove alongside the marshy edge of the golden willow fen. The moonlight glimmered on dew-laden reeds, turning them into ghostly fingers pointing the way. Arya paused in the shelter of a gnarled oak, panting, and strained to hear any sign of pursuit. Nothing but her ragged breathing and the distant croak of frogs. Far behind, the clash of blades resounded. Leonardo fought fiercely, an elegant blur of movement, his rapier thrusting and parrying as the bandits pressed him. The largest of them, a hulking brute with a broken tooth, swung a heavy broadsword at Leonardo's shoulder. The blade grazed his cloak, tearing a ragged seam, but he ducked and drove his point home into the man's thigh. A stifled cry, and the attacker tumbled to the ground. 2 riders helped him up, anger blazing in their eyes as they wheeled toward Leonardo. But before they could close the distance, a sharp whistle split the night. A pack of 4 shadowy figures emerged from the trees, arrows loosed in swift succession. One rider fell from his horse, the other turned to flee. Leonardo recognized the signal. "Fallen!" he called, sheathing his blade. A tall figure strode into the clearing, lithe and silent, clad in forest greens. At his side hung twin short blades and a quiver of slender arrows. "You're a sight for sore eyes," Leonardo said breathlessly. Fa'Ellen's gray eyes glinted in the moonlight. "Your message was urgent, cousin. I guessed your predicament." He glanced toward the carriage, now toppled, horses grazing at the reins. "Trust these woods to hide our misfortunes." Leonardo gave a wry smile. "We'll repair it later, but first," his gaze flicked to where Arya's foot had disappeared along the fence edge. "She went that way." Fa'Ellen nodded. "Good. I saw her slip past and duck into the underbrush. I'll fetch her back." With a graceful stride, he melted into the mist. Leonardo turned to the bandits, now regrouping. "I suggest you leave my family's business out of your raids," he called as Fa'Ellen's arrows tipped off two pursuers' hats, sending them ducking for cover. With a final disdainful sneer, the bandits retreated, horses crashing back into the dark. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic," Leonardo muttered, running a hand through his damp hair. He motioned to the carriage driver, who had witnessed the exchange from a distance. "James, help me salvage the horses and provisions. We'll need them for the mountain pass." James nodded, eyes wide. "Aye, my lord." Leonardo sprinted after Fa'Ellen, crashing through brambles until he found Arya pressed against a thick alder tree. Her cloak was torn, and her face was streaked with mud and tears, but relief blossomed in her eyes when she saw him. "Arya," he said softly, reaching for her hand. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, voice trembling. "Only my pride." He pulled her into an embrace. "I thought I lost you." His lips brushed her hair. "You are my purpose." She pressed the ledger tight. "It fell. I was so frightened." Before he could reply, Fa'Ellen reappeared, handing her the ledger bound with a simple leather thong. "Safe and sound," he said with a half-smile. "I remembered your habit of nodding things when you were nervous, Arya." She blinked in surprise at the stranger's familiarity. "Thank you." Fa'Ellen inclined his head. "Think nothing of it. I've owed Leonardo a favor since he rescued me from those city guards after the Redcoat riot." Arya glanced between the two men. Leonardo grinned sheepishly. "He's overstating my heroics, but we'll accept help where we find it." They returned to the carriage site as James and two stable hands led the horses out. Leonardo wiped the mud from his rapier. "We'll need fresh mounts," he decided. "Send word to Willowmere that we might not arrive until tomorrow night. That buys us time." James bent to unfasten a spare saddlebag. "I can ride one of the beasts, my lord. A fresh set of legs might lighten our pace." Arya mounted one horse, Leonardo another, and Faelen the third. The driver climbed onto a fourth. As they trotted away from the wrecked carriage, Arya looked back at the silver mist swirling over the fen, her heart pounding with gratitude. "You saved me," she whispered. Leonardo kissed her brow. "No, I promise to save you every day I draw breath." Ahead, the northern road snaked into the deepening darkness of the whispering oaks. Owl cries echoed, and unseen creatures rustled in the undergrowth. But for the first time since her life had been measured in coins and contracts, Arya felt a steady rhythm in her veins. Hope. The journey would be perilous, mountain snows, lawless stretches, and the ever-present threat of Marisal's agents. Yet at her side rode two worthy allies and a truth bound in ink that would free her at last. And as the wind tugged at her cloak and the horse's hooves stirred fallen leaves, Arya Rosethorn realized that the song she would sing next would not be one of sorrow, but of triumph and of a future she chose for herself. The forest closed around them like a living shroud. Ancient oaks so tall their iron-barked trunks disappeared into darkness lined a narrow trail, their twisted limbs entwined overhead into a vaulted canopy that allowed only slivers of moonlight to filter through. Arya pulled her cloak tighter against the damp chill and leaned close to Leonardo's horse, whose steady gait carried them deeper into the heart of the whispering oaks. Faelen rode in the middle, scanning the shadows with hawk-like alertness. "Legends say this place is haunted by the echo wraith," Faelen murmured, his voice barely louder than the soft rustle of fallen leaves. "They feed on fear and leave pilgrims lost until dawn. Stay close together, and keep your wits about you." Arya nodded, though her pulse thundered with excitement. The forest felt alive, full of hidden eyes and secret paths. In her satchel, the stolen ledger lay beneath her mother's silver locket, its weight a constant reminder of the journey's stakes. At her hip, her rapier was substituted by a simple dagger more for comfort than combat, but she knew to trust Leonardo's skill with steel first. They'd been riding for hours since escaping Marisal's bandits. Their horses, though fresh, stumbled occasionally over gnarled roots that snagged at their hooves. The path narrowed into muddy ruts. Leonardo dismounted, stepping carefully ahead to test each crossing. Arya dismounted too, instinctively brushing muddy leaves from the ground as they went, as though clearing a stage for her song. "It's too quiet," she whispered. "Not even the owls hoot." Faelen raised a gloved hand to signal a halt. He knelt to examine the ground. "Tracks no ordinary wolves. These prints crisscross the path, as if something has been stalking us." Leonardo joined them, pressing his palm to the cold earth. "They're large, but not heavy enough for a bear. Perhaps wolves enchanted by something." A sudden gust of wind set the leaves quivering like chimes. From the darkness to their right came a faint, keening cry, a sound half human, half animal, twisting the heart with its sorrow. Arya swallowed, memories of her life in Silverlight swirling in her mind. Yet alongside her fear, determination burned. She stepped forward. "Stay here," she called softly. Without waiting for answer, she passed beneath the looming arches of oak and followed the sound. Leonardo and Faelen exchanged a glance before trailing after her, swords drawn. The cry repeated, closer now, drifting through the trees. Arya's heart pounded as she found a small clearing. Moonlight struck the gnarled trunk of an ancient oak carved with runes faintly glowing silver. Beneath it crouched a wounded wolf, its fur matted, one foreleg bent at an unnatural angle. The creature's amber eyes glowed with panic and pain. It's trapped, Arya breathed, kneeling beside it. The wolf's low growl trembled with fear. Arya extended a hand, recalling her mother's gentle lullaby. Easy, boy. I won't hurt you. Her voice quavered through the stillness. The runes on the tree pulsed brighter. Leonardo and Faelen emerged at the edge of the clearing. Arya, be careful, Leonardo warned. Wolves in these woods aren't ordinary, they may be bound by magic. The wolf's growl sharpened as Faelen approached, but Arya held a steady gaze. Reaching into her cloak, she withdrew a small flint and steel, sparking a gentle glow in her palm. This light calms creatures of shadow, she said, recalling an old folk tale. The little flame danced, illuminating her determined features. The wolf's growl softened to a whine, and it edged closer. Leonardo sheathed his sword and knelt beside them. I'll brace its leg, he said. Together they managed to free the wolf from a coil of black brambles hidden in the undergrowth. As the last vine fell away, the runes on the oak dimmed, and the wind stilled. The wolf shook itself, then pressed its head into Arya's hand in gratitude. For a moment, their eyes met, and Arya thought she saw recognition in its dying glow. Then, with a final flicker of its muzzle, the wolf bounded away into the darkness, no longer hunted, but set free. A song for that soul, Faelen said softly. Arya glanced at him, surprised by his empathy. She took a steady breath and began a soft chant, weaving a melody of healing and release. The forest seemed to lean in, leaves trembling in time with her notes. When she finished, a gentle breeze rustled the treetops as though sighing with relief. Leonardo exhaled. You have a gift beyond music. He reached for her hand, his fingers brushing hers. Arya felt warmth spread through her chest. But safety proved fleeting. From the gloom beyond the clearing came a sharp whistle, an unmistakable signal. Arya's blood turned cold. Leonardo drew his rapier in a flash, and Faelen leapt behind a fallen log. A hush preceded 5 mounted riders stepping into moonlight. Each wore the dark livery of Silverlight City Guard, but their faces were hidden by hoods. The lead rider dismounted, sword clattering as it hit the forest floor. Arya Rosethorn. His voice was clipped, official. By order of Governor Stanhart, you are hereby under arrest for theft of private property and breach of contract. Surrender the ledger. Arya's heart froze. Leonardo stepped forward. These are false charges. She is a victim of human trafficking. Hold your peace, men of justice. The guard captain sneered. Spare me your theatrics, Lord Windermere. The governor has no patience for nobles who shelter fugitives. He glanced past Leonardo at Faelen. You, assassin, take them into custody. Faelen's eyes flashed. I serve no governor's whim. He launched forward, daggers whirling. In the next instant, the clearing erupted in motion, steel rang against steel, hoofbeats thundered, and shadows darted between trees. Leonardo engaged 2 guards at once, deflecting blows with precision, while Arya scrambled to her feet, clutching the ledger. One guard lunged at her, sword raised. Arya's heart hammered. She had no blade. Instinctively, she swung the ledger like a paddle, striking the guard's wrist and sending his blade clattering into the mud. He staggered away, stunned. Arya seized the moment to flee deeper into the woods, heart in her throat. Leonardo knocked aside an attack from behind and charged after her. Run, find safer ground, he shouted. But Arya ran toward a hollow tree at the forest's edge, collapsing against its trunk. Her breath came in ragged gasps. The trees parted to reveal a narrow ravine, a steep drop, but the only escape route. Below, a rocky stream glinted in the moonlight. A guard lunged at her from the side, prompting Leonardo to intercept with a resounding clash. Sparks flew as metal swords met. From above, Faelen loosed 2 arrows, pinning a guard's cloak to a trunk. The remaining riders retreated with curses, unwilling to pursue down the ravine. Leonardo grabbed Arya's hand. This way. He draped his cloak around her shoulders and guided her toward a narrow ledge. Hold tight. Arya clutched the ledger to her chest and edged along the precipice as best she could. Leonardo and Faelen followed, providing steadying hands when roots gave way underfoot. The moon beckoned them down into the ravine's shadows, and the roar of the stream grew louder. At the bottom, Arya shielded her face as she stumbled into freezing water. Leonardo caught her, steadying her against the current. I'm not letting go, he vowed. Faelen waded across to help steady them both. Together they pressed along the rocky bank until the water shallowed enough to allow safe passage. The forest closed behind them in dark waves as they scrambled up the far bank, soaked and shivering. But the chase had lifted for now. Faelen wiped his blade on his cloak. The captain does not recognize the ledger's true value. Once you reach Willowmere, the magistrate will expose Marisal's fraud, and these goons will be out of a job. Leonardo tucked a strand of wet hair behind Arya's ear. At dawn, we'll crest the hills overlooking Grey Marsh. There's an old smuggler's path that leads straight to Willowmere's northern gate. Few know of it. Arya's teeth chattered as she smiled. Then let's find shelter before we freeze solid. He wrapped his cloak around her again and kissed her temple. Your song warmed the forest. Let it warm you now. They set off uphill, 3 soaked figures forging their way toward safety. Behind them, the whispering oaks fell silent once more, its secrets buried beneath moonlit leaves. Ahead, The promise of dawn and the hope of unshackled freedom spurred them onward, three souls bound by courage, love, and the unbreakable melody of destiny. They climbed the final ridge of gray marsh just as dawn's pale fingers pried open the sky. Below them, a sea of whispering reeds rolled in gentle waves toward the steely river that marked the border of Willowmere. Arya's teeth still chattered from the icy ravine, but her heart soared. Freedom lay within reach. Leonardo led her by the hand, his grip firm and warm, while Faelen rode abreast, eyes alert for any sign of pursuit. "Only the Silverway remains," Leonardo announced, pointing to a narrow trail carved into the hillside, the ancient smuggler's path that would lead them to the northern gate. "Few guards patrol this route." Arya pressed her cheek against Leonardo's shoulder. "I can almost taste the fresh bread at your uncle's table." He laughed softly. "And I can almost taste garlic and rosemary, my mother's specialty." Faelen sheathed his blades and examined the path. "The footing here is treacherous. One misstep, and you'll tumble into the Brynjude below." He offered his arm to Arya. She slipped her hand into his, trusting his sure steps. The wind whipped her damp hair into a tangled halo. Ahead, a low bank of storm clouds churned over the Silver Peak Mountains. Arya frowned. "Isn't the weather supposed to clear by afternoon?" Leonardo's brow darkened. "A sudden gale has chased the storm off the western coasts, now it's barreling inland. We must hurry, or we'll be caught in the eye of the storm." They pressed on, the path narrowing until only one horse could pass at a time. Arya felt the spray of the river far below, its brackish mist coating her cloak with salt. High above, a solitary hawk wheeled on the wind, its cry an omen of both peril and protection. As they rounded a bend, the path was blocked by a great slab of fallen rock, a recent landslide. The horses whinnied, shifting uneasily on the slick stone. Leonardo slid from his saddle. "We'll have to clear it by hand." Faelen knelt beside the debris, testing its weight. "We can lever it aside with those stanchions. Help me brace a log." He spotted an ancient beam lodged between two boulders. Together with Leonardo, they shifted the log into place and heaved until the slab groaned free, tumbling down the slope with a thunderous crash. Arya crouched against the hillside, heart racing. "Are you hurt?" Leonardo brushed grit from his sleeve. "Only scratched." "Come, we must move before the wind picks up." They remounted and continued, the gale now a distant howl. The sky above split open with the crack of thunder, quicksilver lightning hacking the clouds into ragged shreds. Rain erupted in a sudden deluge, cold and spitting like 1,000 needles. "By the gods!" Arya gasped, tugging her cloak tight. Water ran in cold rivulets down her neck. The path turned slick, the horses struggled for footing. Leonardo urged his mount forward. "Hold on." The wind hammered them from the front, and the narrow trail offered little shelter. They passed beneath a coppice of twisted pines, whose gnarled roots formed a makeshift arch. Arya thought she saw flickering lantern light deeper in the woods, something that didn't belong to the storm. Instinct prickled at her spine. "Leonardo, over there!" she shouted, pointing. Ahead, leaning against a tree, was a cloaked figure beside a flickering brazier. The fire glowed like a beacon in the storm. A hand beckoned them closer. Leonardo didn't slow. It could be bandits or worse, Marisol's men. But Arya sat lightly in her saddle. "Wait, he's alone. Let me see." Against the torrents, she urged her horse forward, Leonardo close at her flank and Faelan covering her rear. The figure lifted his hood, revealing a lean, chiseled face framed by silver-streaked black hair. His eyes were bright as frost. He raised his hand in peace. "Good travelers, you seem in need," he called over the wind, gesturing to the brazier. "I am Roderick Grey, guide to the Silverway. Let me offer sanctuary." Leonardo's rapier glinted. "We ask no quarter from strangers." Roderick smiled, though his eyes remained guarded. "Then allow me the courtesy of proving my loyalty." He crouched by the brazier, stirring glowing coals with a poker. Sparks drifted into the rain. "I learned of your flight from Silverlight, how Marisol cheated the girl of her birthright. You carry the ledger, yes?" Arya's breath hitched. Leonardo stiffened. "Who are you to know of this?" Roderick's gaze flicked to the burning embers. "I once served under Lord Grimshaw's command, until I discovered the depths of Marisol's scheming. I defected, swearing to aid any who fled the Iron Boar's tyranny." Arya's heart pounded. Could she trust him? The storm whipped around them like mad spirits. Faelan dismounted, moving to stand between Roderick and Arya. "Words are wind in a storm. Do you bear proof of your claim?" Roderick produced a small chest from beneath his cloak. Inside lay a tarnished silver ring, its crest engraved with the Grimshaw boar between twin ferns. "Stolen from Bartholomew's private cabin atop the Glitters Pier," he said. "He left it there last night. I retrieved it as a token that I stand against him." Leonardo glanced at the ring, then at Arya. The storm's fury made every decision feel monumental. "If this ring is genuine, you may ride with us. But if you betray us..." Roderick nodded. "I risk my name for this cause." Arya slid from her mount and joined Roderick at the brazier. She dared to place her hand over the coals, letting the heat seep up through her damp gloves. "I need warm hands to keep my song alive," she murmured. Rain pattered against the brazier's shield, but inside that small circle of light, they stood united, a fugitive princess of song, a noble warrior, a ranger of the wild, and an exile seeking redemption. Leonardo mounted once more. "Let us press on, before the storm's ice swallows us whole." He offered his hand to Roderick. The guide accepted, vaulting onto a lean, black horse hidden beneath the tarpaulin. The quartet set off, forging through the maelstrom. Arya huddled close to Leonardo, the stolen ledger safe in her satchel. The silverway's twists and turns tested their resolve, waterlogged roots, crumbling ledges, and swirling mists that blurred the boundary between earth and sky. At last, as noon's pale light broke through cloud gaps, they descended toward Willowmere's northern gate, a stout timber structure flanked by rain-slicked walls. 2 guards in mud-spattered crimson tabards barred their passage, but their eyes widened at the sight of the ring on Roderick's finger and the official seal dangling from Leonardo's neck. By order of Lady Magistrate Windermere, Leonardo announced, "We bring evidence of the trafficking ring operating in Silverlight. Permit us entry." The guards exchanged glances. One tapped a brass whistle to his lips, the other saluted. "Enter swiftly, sir, there are inquiries to be made." Arya sighed, wet cloak dripping onto the cobblestones, but relief blossomed within her raw, unguarded joy. Faelin gave her a respectful nod, and Roderick allowed a rare grin to crack his solemn facade. Inside the gate, Willowmere stretched before them, tidy stone houses with smokestacks puffing little spirals of white, a bustling market square where vendors hawk steaming bowls of stew, and the Magistrate's Manor, a stately building of polished granite. They had escaped Silverlight's clutches. Now justice beckoned, and with it, the chance for Arya's song to ring unbound, clear as freedom's dawn. Dawn's delicate rose light filtered through the stained glass windows of the Magistrates' Council Hall, gilding the carved columns and frescoed ceiling in a warm glow. Arya stood at the threshold, her damp cloak replaced by a simple teal gown that once belonged to Leonardo's late mother. She felt its fabric smooth against her skin, a reminder of the kindness that had guided her here. At her side, Leonardo straightened his uncle's silver-trimmed tabard, Faelin scanned the assembled guards with narrowed eyes, and Roderick Grey checked the straps on his rapier, ready for any last-minute betrayals. Before them, Lady Magistrate Adeline Windermere presided from an elevated dais. Her hair was streaked with white, her bearing resolute. She would never allow injustice to hide behind power in her city. Leonardo had petitioned her 2 nights ago with the ledger and Roderick's ring as proof, invoking an ancient law that freed any servant held in bondage without proper inventories and sworn contracts. Now, the council met in solemn session to hear Arya's testimony. The chamber was hushed, 100 pairs of eyes fixed on the 4 weary travelers. Merchants and guild masters, common citizens, and noble envoys all had gathered, drawn by rumors of the trafficking ring exposed in Silverlight. At last, Adeline rapped her gavel. "Let the court come to order. We shall hear the charges brought by Lord Leonardo Windermere on behalf of Arya Rosethorn." Leonardo stepped forward, voice firm but courteous. "Your ladyship, esteemed members of the council, this ledger," he held up the fat book, its cover still stained with silver dust, records the countless performances, private engagements, and illicit payments extracted from Miss Rosethorn by Aunt Marisol and Lord Bartholomew Grimshaw. It is a record of human lives measured in coin, contrary to every statute of our realm. A murmur traversed the crowd. Arya pressed her hand against the ledger in Leonardo's grip, feeling the rustle of parchment beneath her palm. Adeline inclined her head. Present the evidence, my lord. On Fa'Ellen's signal, 2 guards carried forth a polished oak chest. Roderick stepped forward and unlocked its iron hasp, producing the silver Grimshaw ring. Gasps and stifled cries echoed as he displayed it. Stolen from Grimshaw's private cabin upon the Glitters Pier last night, he announced. Worn by Lord Grimshaw's own hand, then discarded when the ledger could not be hidden further. Leonardo laid the ledger on the marble dais, its pages splayed open. He flipped to one entry after another, 20 gold sovereigns for exclusive performance May 23 RD Torture of Dead. 10 more for private amusements thereafter. 3 dozen nights logged with no reduction in principal, evidence of fraud and perpetual bondage. Arya's voice trembled as she rose. She began, inspiration and fear warring in her chest. I am no criminal. I was a child sold into this life, told that every song would bring me closer to freedom, yet Marisol's words were lies. I sang because it was all I had, and each note weighed me down further. Her confession resonated through the hall. Several counselors exchanged glances, some reddening with shame. Leonardo gave her an encouraging nod. She cleared her throat and continued, softer but no less certain, tonight, I stand not as a debtor, but as a woman claiming her right to live free of fear. A hush fell at her final words. Then Adeline rose from her seat, robes whispering, this court recognizes that no human may be owned, nor may any write such a ledger without recourse. On these grounds, I hereby rule Marisol and Grimshaw guilty of human trafficking, fraud, and violation of the Statute of Freedoms. They shall be arrested on sight, their assets seized to compensate Miss Rosethorn, and their names struck from every ledger in this land. Applause erupted, rolling through the chamber like thunder. Guards in scarlet and gold marched to either side of the dais, ready to enforce the decree. Leonardo reached for Arya's hand and squeezed it. Fa'Ellen allowed himself a smile, and Roderick wiped a single tear from his cheek. But as the crowd surged forward, some cheering, some kneeling in solidarity, an urgent voice rang out from the back, wait. A tall figure in mirrored armor strode into view, helmet tucked under his arm. It was Captain Ulrich Kane of the Willowmere Guard, his expression stormy. He held a sealed parchment in one hand. By the governor's warrant under old law, this court's judgment is hereby stayed. Lord Bartholomew Grimshaw has filed an appeal, citing sovereign immunity as Crown Commerce Officer. A gasp rippled through the chamber. Adeline's eyes narrowed. Sovereign immunity holds only when duties are performed for the crown. Trafficking women for profit cannot be deemed crown service. Ulrich snapped the parchment open. Nevertheless, until a royal edict is delivered, no action may be taken against him on these charges. The appeal court sits in Sedgemoor next fortnight. Pandemonium broke out. Merchants shouted protest. Nobles whispered betrayal. Leonardo's jaw clenched. He bowed his head to Lady Adeline. Your ladyship, he will escape justice if we do not act now. Fa'Ellen stepped forward, hand on hilt. His guards must not seize my lady tonight. Adeline raised a hand. We will adjourn to the outer hall. Meanwhile, do not disperse. I will dispatch emissaries to Aragon to secure a royal decree. Arya felt a cold knot tighten in her chest. Just as hope bloomed, a new obstacle arose, the crown's bureaucracy and Grimshaw's political clout. The court's victory felt incomplete. Outside the hall, torches flared as Bartholomew Grimshaw himself appeared on a raised pavilion opposite the entrance, flanked by his personal guard 20 mercenaries armed with halberds and pikes. His pudgy fingers glinted in gold rings precisely matched to his girth. He raised a jeweled goblet and sneered. "My lady magistrate," he called in a mocking baritone, "you've shown mercy by granting me an appeal. Let us see if the crown's ear is more sympathetic than yours." Arya stood at the balcony rail, heart pounding. Leonardo slid to stand beside her and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "We must not despair," he murmured. "The crown's wheels turn slowly, yes, but they turn. And before Grimshaw can muster real power here, we will gather evidence of his every crime and sway public sentiment in our favor." Roderick stepped up next to them. "Bartholomew underestimates the bond between the people and those who fight for their freedom. We have 2 weeks at most to rally Willowmere common folk, merchants, even some minor nobles who despise Grimshaw's arrogance." Fallon nodded, scanning the mercenary ranks. "His guards are steel and coin, but we have cunning and conviction." He sheathed his blades. "We strike first at their supply chains, wine shipments and salted fish consignments he uses to bribe officials. Cut those off, and his leverage crumbles." Lady Adeline joined the group, her gaze firm. "I will convene a council of aldermen this eve. You 4 go to the market square, speak to the guilds, to the crowd. Show them the ledger, share the truth." Arya's pulse fluttered fear and excitement in equal measure. She began. Then, glancing at Leonardo's encouraging smile, she squared her shoulders. "Yes. I will sing the ledger's truth before the masses." That evening, the square was packed. Lanterns hung from ropes crisscrossing above, their golden light flickering against excited faces. Arya stood atop a cart, the leather ledger open before her, Leonardo by her side with Roderick and Fallon flanking them. The hush was palpable. Arya took a deep breath. Then she began not with song, but with her clear, unbroken voice. She read aloud the ledger's entries, line by line, the sums extracted, the promises broken, the night stolen. Each paragraph was like a dagger to Grimshaw's reputation. The crowd gasped, then muttered, then roared in outrage. When she finished, silence fell, punctuated only by distant horns. Suddenly, the sky cracked as lightning split cloud and bluff. A gust of wind scattered papers through the square. Shining within the swirl of leaves and page fragments came the crest of the crown's seal, borne by a royal courier on black stallion, an edict signed by King Emmerich himself, commanding the immediate Arrest of Bartholomew Grimshaw on charges of trafficking, fraud, and contempt of court. The crowd erupted in cheers so thunderous they shook the lanterns from overhead ropes. Grimshaw's mercenaries hesitated, then dropped their pikes and fled. Bartholomew himself turned to run, only to be seized by two magistrates' guards who bore him away with the triumphant crowd chanting Aria's name. Leonardo caught Aria's hand as she stepped down from the cart, relief and joy flooding her eyes. "You did it," he breathed. She smiled, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. "We did it." Behind them, Lady Adeline embraced Aria. Ellen and Roderick exchanged triumphant grins. And above, the lanterns swung gently back into rhythm, as though the very city of Willowmere bowed in tribute to truth, courage, and the power of a single voice to shatter chains. In the midst of celebration, Aria lifted her face to the storm-cleared sky, stars shining like chorus lights. Her song would never again be shackled by debt. Instead, it would soar carrying justice, hope, and a melody of freedom far beyond Willowmere's walls. And somewhere, in Silverlight's distant towers, that song already echoed like a distant breeze heralding the dawn of new reckonings. Dawn's first light crested the high walls of Willowmere as Aria Rosethorn stood on the parapet of the city's northern gate. The crisp morning breeze carried with it the scent of baked bread and fresh-turned earth, a reminder of renewal. Behind her, Leonardo, Ellen, and Roderick gathered their small retinue of magistrates' guards and freed servants, ready for the journey ahead. At her side, Leonardo murmured, "Tonight, we ride back to Silverlight. Your voice set you free here, but there are dozens still trapped beyond those walls who need you." Aria nodded, her heart swelling with purpose. Marisol's trafficking ring extends far beyond one brothel. We have the funds from Grimshaw's seized estates and the governor's decree. We'll strike at the root. Ellen unfolded a rough parchment map. I've charted the safe routes back through the Silver Peak foothills. We'll cross the Grayfen where the river splits like a serpent's tongue, then skirt the outlaw camps. They respect our escort now. Lady Magistrate's warrant precedes us. Roderick strapped his rapier to his hip. Word of Grimshaw's fall has reached Silverlight's underworld. Marisol's lieutenants are scrambling to cover their tracks or flee. We must move quickly, before they vanish. Leonardo clasped Aria's hand. Your ledger, he whispered. We'll use its pages to subpoena every debtor, every judge, every official complicit in the slave ledgers. We'll bring truth to the light. They mounted their horses as the gates swung open. Behind them, Willowmere awoke in celebration. Ahead, the road winded west toward the distant towers of Silverlight. The Grayfen crossing. By midday they reached the brackish marshes of Grayfen, where the twin streams forged a watery labyrinth. Sunlight danced on the winding channels, but the reeds harbored hidden dangers, mud traps, and vengeful spirits whispered in the reeds. Ellen rode ahead, scouting shallow fords with a long staff. At each crossing, Leonardo lent his weight to steady Aria's mount. Roderick stood guard at the rear, rapier drawn against any ambush. As the horses splashed through the final channel, A shrill cry echoed from the reeds. A group of ragged women stumbled into view, faces hollow, bodies gaunt, clothes torn. Their wrists bore raw scars where shackles once were. Arya reined in, heart pounding. By all the gods, she breathed. One woman collapsed at her feet. Leonardo dismounted, cradling her. Faelen knelt to inspect the other women's bindings, improvised monocles of rope and bone. They escaped Marisal's river barge, Roderick guessed. The convoy was attacked by bandits who left them half dead. Arya dismounted too, retrieving clean cloth from her saddlebag. She knelt beside the fallen woman, speaking softly, "You're safe now. I'm Arya Rosethorn, and I will free you." Gently she tore at the rope, exposing red welts. The woman's tear-filled eyes met Arya's. "I thought I'd never sing again," she whispered. Arya smiled. "Here, you will sing, and we will build a new chorus." With Leonardo and Faelen's help, they untangled the last survivors, offered water and rations. Though the Greyfen's mist swirled with sorrow, a new hope took root in the group's trembling voices. 2. The Outlaws Pass. That evening, they reached Outlaws Pass, a narrow defile quarried from black slate, where highwaymen once held sway. Now the path was patrolled by Willomir's guard under Roderick's command. Lanterns lined the cliff face, guiding their procession. The freed women walked between magistrate soldiers, their ragged forms illuminated in soft golden glow. As they turned a bend, Marisal's personal envoy, two grim-faced couriers bearing black banners, blocked the path. Their leader, a gaunt man with hawkish features, raised a jeweled scimitar. "Miss Rosethorn," he drawled, "Madame Marisal demands the ledger's return unsullied, or the debts of your new chorus will be called due this very night." Leonardo's jaw tightened. "This court's decree voids all bonds held by Marisal. Under penalty of arrest, step aside." The envoy laughed. "Our black warrants trump your willow parchments." He gestured, and his men closed in. Roderick's sword flashed. "They overestimate their master's reach." Arya held up the ledger. "These pages are sworn before a magistrate. They bear the king's seal. No black warrant can undo the truth." Lightning ripped the sky, and the fronts of the outlaws paused, uneasy in the storm's fury. Faelen released a single arrow that thudded against the rock wall. The echo shattered the envoy's resolve. With a snarl, the hawkish captain signaled retreat, and they melted back into the darkness. Arya exhaled, voice trembling. "Thank you for standing with me." Leonardo brushed a lock of hair from her face. "Forever." 3. The brothel beneath the tower. 2 days later, they rode up Silverlight's winding quay, past warehouses of imported spice and silk. At the foot of the city's grand lighthouse, its lantern shining like a watchful eye, lay the Silverlight brothel, a labyrinth of red lanterns, silent corridors, and iron-grilled windows. This was Marisal's fortress. Arya dismounted, stealing her nerves. Ellen and Roderick flanked her as Leonardo presented the royal writ to the brothel's door sentry, a pair of burly thugs with blank expressions. By order of King Emmerich, Leonardo announced, I, Lord Leonardo Windermere, with council authority, demand immediate release of all human captives within. The sentries sneered, but the writ glowed with a faint bluish light, the royal seal enchanted to enforce obedience. They stepped aside. Inside, the corridors were perfumed with stale incense and echoes of muffled sobs. Arya's heart clenched. She recognized alcoves where she once performed, small booths where the powerful staked their appetites. Now, they would pay for each stolen night. Ellen whispered, "Women down that hall." He indicated a side passage. Roderick and the guards burst through a trapdoor into the basement cells. Leonardo guided Arya forward to a gilded parlor, where Marisol sat behind a carved ivory desk, flanked by two clockwork-patterned mirrors. Her once vibrant hair was streaked with gray, her eyes, however, still glittered with malice. "Rosethorn," Marisol purred, rising. "Back for an encore." Arya raised her chin. "Your show is over, Aunt." She gestured to the guards. "Release them." One cell after another swung open, dozen after dozen of pale, hollow-eyed women and several young men, all blinking at freedom's harsh light. Some collapsed in sobs, others scurried toward Arya, embracing her ankles. Marisol's face contorted. "You cannot undo what I've done. Those girls owe me a debt I paid forward with blood coin." Leonardo pressed the royal seal to the desk. "Queen's law, any debt enforced by violence, slavery, or coercion is null and void. You stand guilty of every count." Marisol grabbed the silver mirror from the wall and smashed it to the floor. "Then destroy me. Let me rot in a cell as those I wronged have rotted." Ellen sheathed his dagger. "You won't die in prison, but you will work these halls cleaning, cooking, tending to those you enslave. You will witness their liberation each day." Arya approached and laid a gentle hand on Marisol's shoulder. "Your vengeance is yours to earn. May you find mercy in the songs you once stole." Tears ran down Marisol's cheeks, mingling contrition and rage. Guards led her away, shackles on gilded wrists. In that moment, Arya realized that justice need not break the spirit, but temper it. 4. The Rising Chorus. By nightfall, the freed captives gathered in the lighthouse's courtyard. Arya ascended an improvised dais of crates and barrels. The wind shifted, carrying her voice across the harbor's still waters as she began to sing, a resounding hymn of freedom, unity, and the triumph of truth. Behind her, dozens of voices joined, once silent, now voices of power. Leonardo swept his cloak aside and drew his rapier, twirling it like a baton to keep time. Ellen tapped a wooden drum, its beat like a heartbeat. Roderick raised a lute, picking a soft accompaniment. Each note soared above the key, rousing townsfolk from taverns and alleyways. Lanterns swung in a breeze, illuminating tear-streaked faces lifted toward the songbird who had turned her own chains into wings. Smoke drifted from the lighthouse's lantern, no longer a warning beacon, but a promise of hope. Ships in the harbor raised their sails, horns tooted in salute, and distant bells began to ring. As the final chord faded, Arya lowered her head. The crowd roared their gratitude. Leonardo gathered Arya in his arms, and the chorus erupted once more, this time in joyful chant. High above, the moon peeked from behind ragged clouds, silvery rays brushing Arya's hair like a crown. She whispered to Leonardo, "This is only the beginning." He kissed her temple. "Together, we will rewrite every story that tried to break us." And so, under the watchful eye of Silverlight's lighthouse, a new chapter was written, not of songs sold for coin, but of melodies set free, echoing beyond walls, across marsh and mountain, to every heart yearning for liberty. The silver towers trembled with the rising chorus of liberated souls. And at the crest of that song, Arya Rosethorn stood triumphant, no longer caged, but soaring on wings wrought from her own spirit, ready to face whatever dawn might bring. The first light of dawn filtered through the stained glass windows of Silverlight's grand guild hall, splashing motes of color across the polished oak floor. Arya Rosethorn stood at the head of a long, narrow table hewn from ironwood trees, the ledger laid open before her. Around her, representatives from the Tailors' Consortium, the Dockmasters' League, the Healers' Circle, and even the Merchants' Exchange gathered, each holding trembling pens and heavy parchment scrolls. Beside her, Leonardo Windermere wore the silver-trimmed insignia of Freedom's Voice, gifted by Lady Magistrate Adeline, while Fa Ellen and Roderick Grey flanked the dais, vigilant as ever. Arya cleared her throat, heart swelling with determination. "Friends of Silverlight, today we take the next step toward justice. This ledger," she tapped its battered cover, "is only the beginning. Within these pages lie the names of those who have profited from human misery, corrupt innkeepers, dishonest ship captains, and black market brokers. I ask you to sign these writs, demanding investigation and closure of every establishment implicated." A murmur swept the assembled guilds. Master Tailor Anselm broke the silence first, bowing his grizzled head. "My cutters will refuse custom to any who employ trafficked labor." The Tailors' Consortium signs. One by one, the guild masters rose. The dock masters vowed to patrol the quays, intercept suspicious vessels. The healers pledged to shelter and nurse survivors. Even the Merchants' Exchange, long fearful of Grimshaw's influence, committed their warehouses to confiscated goods, ensuring no looted items re-entered the marketplace. Arya's eyes glistened. "Your signatures seal Silverlight's rebirth. Together, we bind this city with a new covenant: none shall profit from another's suffering." With a final flourish, she signed her name and offered the quill to Leonardo, who added his own. The echo of his stroke on parchment resonated like a second chorus to her heart. Outside, the city stirred to life. Word of the council's oath spread from taverns to tenements, carried on the tongues of fishermen, smiths, and chimney sweeps alike. Banners proclaiming no chains in Silverlight unfurled on lamp posts, and patients freed from Marisol's clandestine clinics began to share their stories with passers-by. Arya slipped into the crowd, her presence a beacon of hope, as Faelen marshaled the rescued women and children toward the Freeman's Refuge, the safe house established by the Healer's Circle. By midday, Roderick had deciphered a hidden cipher in the ledger's margins, a series of crossed-out entries that hinted at a secondary ledger buried in the old dockside warehouses. Precisely at high noon, Arya and Leonardo, accompanied by a small escort of magistrates' guards and Faelen, approached the weathered stone building where the stench of seawater mingled with decay. The warehouse doors groaned as they were forced open, revealing crates stamped with Marisol's insignia. "Look here," Roderick whispered, uncovering a concealed trapdoor beneath a stack of salted herring barrels. With combined effort they heaved it aside, revealing grafted iron rings and steps leading into a dank cellar. Lanterns flickered as they descended, and the air grew thick with mildew. At the bottom, they found a battered chest bound with rusted chains. Leonardo released the lock with a magistrate's key. Inside were dozens of ledger volumes, each recording hundreds of names, men, women, and children sold across the realm. Gasps filled the chamber as Arya's trembling hand lifted the top book. "Every soul here deserves reprieve," she said. "We will free them all." Back in the guild hall, she presented the recovered volumes to Magistrate Adeline, whose stern eyes softened as she listened to the names read aloud. "Silverlight's courts will not rest until every last page is acted upon," Adeline declared, her gavel crackling like thunder. The room erupted in a chorus of agreement. That evening, as celebration made its way through the city's lantern-lit streets, Leonardo brought Arya to the lighthouse plaza, where the freed captives had gathered to sing one final hymn of liberation. The key was transformed into a tapestry of grateful voices. As Arya raised her voice, the crowd joined, echoing her melody across the water. When the last note faded, Leonardo knelt before her and produced a small box of polished black ebony. Inside lay a silver pendant engraved with two interlocking wings, his personal crest entwined with hers. "For you," he said softly. "May it remind you that even the heaviest chains can become wings." He fastened the pendant against her neck, and Arya felt warmth bloom through her chest. But the triumph was tempered by a new summons. As the lanterns blinked and fires crackled, a herald in royal livery approached, bearing a sealed missive stamped with King Emmerich's crest. Arya exchanged a glance with Leonardo before breaking the wax seal. "My Lady Rosethorn," the herald intoned, "His Majesty commands your presence at the Crown Court in Ardennia. You are to present the ledger's full evidence before the King's Privy Council, that the laws of all realms may be rewritten to ban human trafficking forever." A hush fell. Arya felt the weight of the moment. Her voice, once confined to a brothel's walls, now summoned to shape the fate of an entire kingdom. Leonardo placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Your song will reach far beyond Silverlight. We ride at dawn." Faelen offered a wry grin. "And I shall scout the forest anew, tarry over no bridge unattended." Roderick bowed. "I will see to the safe transport of every recovered ledger. Justice will follow in our wake." Under the glow of the lighthouse's lantern, the four companions stood shoulder to shoulder. Arya closed her eyes, breathed in the briny air, and raised her voice one final time that night, a clarion call of hope and defiance that rang clear across the harbor and into the unknown road ahead. Tomorrow, they would journey to the capital. But for this moment, they were free luminous spirits borne aloft by the melodies of truth, ready to turn the tide of history with the power of a single ledger and a single song. The morning sun painted the dew-glazed fields in molten gold as Arya Rosethorn and her companions set out from Silverlight's lighthouse quay. Their company had grown, a caravan of magistrates' guards, freed captives, and willing volunteers from the guilds, all bearing ledgers, witness statements, and bundles of evidence. Leonardo Windermere rode at Arya's side, the ebony wings pendant glinting at her throat. Faelin scouted ahead on his swift mare, while Roderick Grey brought up the rear with groups of rescued women and a handful of healers tending to travelers still recovering from shackles and illness. Their destination lay 3 days' ride west, the citadel of Ardenea, capital of the realm, where King Emmerich's Privy Council convened in stately chambers gilded with dragon-scale mosaics. There, Arya would present the full ledger collection and call for a new royal statute to outlaw human trafficking across every province. Through the Silver Peak foothills. They left Silverlight's paved road for the worn pack trail that wound through the Silver Peak foothills. Pine forests replaced salt-soaked air with the scent of resin, and mountain streams sang over smooth stones. The first night, they camped under a canopy of stars so bright that Faelin swore he saw the Milky Way's dust lanes glimmer between pines. Arya sang softly around the campfire, a lullaby of hope that soothed the freed captives huddled on furs. Leonardo gathered them in a tight circle, speaking of Ardenea's justice and promising that every name in the ledgers would be heard. The next morning, they continued. The second day brought a sudden thunderstorm. Sheets of rain pelted their ponies, and muddy gullies threatened to swallow their wheels. Supplies shifted in wagons, forcing Roderick and half the guards to walk beside the carts, balancing each crate. Arya's heart lurched when a wheel sank into a hidden mire, dumping a chest of ledgers into quagmire muck. Soldiers and healers sprang to help, but Arya dashed forward, plunging her hands in the cold sludge to retrieve each parchment. Her gown soaked through, but she clutched the stained pages to her chest, whispering apologies even as she pressed on. Leonardo appeared at her side, carrying fresh parchment from the wagons. "We'll copy what's lost," he vowed, handing her a roll of blank sheets. "Nothing will be left undone." By dusk, they had finally toppled the last ridge and beheld the fertile plain surrounding Ardenea. Towering battlements ringed the city like a crown, while beyond, the king's citadel rose on a terraced hill, its spires glittering in the late sun. 2. The Gate of Thorns. Approaching the Gate of Thorns, the massive iron portcullis carved with intertwined rose stems, they were met by mounted royal marshals in scarlet cloaks. Captain Ulrich Kane rode at their head, his expression grave. "Lady Rosethorn, the king awaits you in Council Hall. But suffice to say, not all your reception will be warm." Arya inhaled sharply. "I expected opposition." Leonardo squeezed her hand. "Let's show them the truth." At the marshal's signal, the portcullis rumbled open. Beneath the carved roses, their caravan filed into the plaza of statues, where onlookers gathered to watch the procession. Freed captives cheered, merchants cheered back, and beggars wiped their eyes in wonder. Arya raised her hand in greeting, feeling the pulse of expectation thrumming through the crowd. 3. The Privy Council Chamber. They ascended marble steps into the Privy Council chamber, an oval room ringed with towering pillars of onyx and crystal chandeliers shaped like dragon wings. At the far end sat King Emmerich himself, gilded in royal blue and gold, his long hair silvered at the temples. Around him were the Lord Chancellor, the Master of Coin, the Admiral of the West Fleet, and other high ministers. Their faces ranged from respectful to guarded. Ulrich Kane announced, "Your Majesty, Lady Arya Rosethorn of Silverlight, bearing evidence of a trafficking network that spans this realm." Accompanied by Lord Leonardo Windermere, Ranger Vaelen Grey, and Roderick Grey, former aide to Lord Grimshaw. The king's piercing gaze settled on Arya. "You have my ears." He gestured to an empty chaise beside the royal dais. Arya bowed and took her seat, heart pounding. Leonardo and the others bowed as well. "Present your case," the king commanded. Arya stood, smoothing her damp gown. She held up the first volume. "Your Majesty, these ledgers catalog hundreds of lives enslaved under false contracts, exploited for profit in brothels, mines, and merchant caravans. Silverlight's courts have begun prosecutions, but this crime knows no borders. I ask you to enact a royal statute of unconditional liberation, nullifying all such bonds and establishing a crown commission to investigate and dismantle trafficking rings." She opened the ledger. Page after page revealed names, women, children, artisans, all sold into debt servitude. A hush fell. The Lord Chancellor adjusted his spectacles. "The precedent of serfdom in our northern provinces complicates this matter." Arya's voice was steady. "Serfdom binds peasants to the land. Trafficking is the sale of human souls for profit, regardless of station, without recourse. They are not born to bondage, they are stolen." She then called on Leonardo, who recounted Marisal's exploits and Lord Grimshaw's abuses, presenting the silver ring and trapdoor ledgers. Vaelen and Roderick corroborated each account with sworn testimony from rescued captives now seated in galleries above. At one point, a mother held up her child, an infant born in captivity, drawing tears from many council members. The Master of Coin interjected, "Such a statute would devastate certain merchant houses' bottom lines." He tapped a ledger of his own. "We rely on bound labor in the warehouses." Leonardo stepped forward. "Properly regulated wages and apprenticeships would yield higher productivity and greater consumer trust. The moral high ground will bring more trade than shady practices ever did." Admiral Rowena Silverheart rose, her armor clinking. "I have witnessed pirates selling captives along our coast. It is a stain on our flag." She placed a signed petition at the king's feet. "My fleet pledges to patrol the shore and enforce the new law." A deep voice rumbled from the gallery. "Lady Eleanor Fairfax, a minor noble who had once opposed Arya's cause, stood. I was blind to the suffering beyond my estates. Now I pledge my own lands as safe zones. I will sign the statute and fund shelters for survivors. The chamber erupted in applause. Even the Lord Chancellor nodded once. King Emmerich leaned forward, resting his hand on the carved lion's head armrest. Your testimony has shown me the depths of this evil. I hereby decree the statute of unconditional liberation. Henceforth, any bond of servitude not voluntarily entered and any that is sold, transferred, or inherited without explicit, lawful consent is null and void. A crown commission led by the Master of Coin and Admiral Silverheart will be established at once. Lady Rosethorn, you shall be its first commissioner. Arya pressed her palm to her heart. I am honored to serve. The king's lips curved. And may your song guide our realm to justice. 4. A new dawn for the realm. Courtiers spilled into the halls to draft the new statute by candlelight. Arya, Leonardo, Faelen, and Roderick stood in antechamber corridors, watching the dawn's rose light filter through tall windows. The weight of responsibility lay heavy on her, still leading a commission, overseeing free labor regulations, and supporting survivors. Yet in her chest burned a fierce hope. Leonardo slipped an arm around her waist. You did it? Now the realm will know freedom's melody. Faelen offered her a vial of mountain spring water. To keep your voice clear for the tides ahead. Roderick produced a crisp scroll sealed with the crown's emblem. Your first decree as commissioner, release and repatriate every trafficked soul still in custody. This scroll will instruct the captains to drop you at each port. Arya took the scroll, eyes shining. Then let us ride. They left the council chamber under the banner of the new statute, the marble steps beneath their boots echoing as heralds trumpeted their names. Outside, the city of Ardennia burst into celebration, flags unfurled, church bells pealed, and the air filled with joyous cries. On the steps of the citadel, Arya raised her voice in a single, resounding note, pure, unwavering, and full of promise. Leonardo, Faelen, and Roderick joined in harmony, and the crowd below lifted their voices in unison. That song carried across the kingdom, an anthem for the liberated, a warning to the oppressors, and a testament to the power of one voice to change the world. And as the sun climbed higher, the realm of Ardennia stood reborn under the statute of unconditional liberation, its future forever shaped by the courage of Arya Rosethorn, the songbird of Silverlight. The dawn wind carried a promise of fresh beginnings as Arya Rosethorn rode out of Ardennia's citadel gates alongside Leonardo Windermere, Faelen Grey, and Roderick Grey. Arrayed behind them was the newly formed Crown Commission Magistrates Guards, naval officers under Admiral Silverheart's banner, guild envoys bearing official seals, and a flotilla of small carts, loaded with provisions for liberated captives. Overhead, the banners of the Statute of Unconditional Liberation fluttered white and gold, emblazoned with interlocking wings, the symbol Arya had worn since that council in the Guildhall at Willowmere. Arya inhaled deeply, catching the scent of early spring blossoms mingled with sea salt. Today they would embark on a month-long journey across the realm's coastal provinces, from Ardenia's western shores to the farthest eastern ports, to execute the statute's first decree: every man, woman, and child held in bondage was to be freed, compensated, and provided with safe passage to lands of their choosing. It was a monumental task, fraught with peril. But with each mile traveled, Arya felt the weight of her mission settle into a fierce determination. The port of Blackwater Bay. Their first destination lay 2 days' ride to the south, Blackwater Bay, a once notorious hub of clandestine shipping. The narrow causeway leading to the port town was lined with rickety watchtowers, now manned by crowned soldiers in scarlet tunics. Fishermen's nets lay piled along the quays, and empty cargo crates bore the faded insignia of Lord Grimshaw's old merchant fleet. Arya dismounted near the governor's sands, an open stretch of cobblestone facing the harbour, and spoke to Governor Marcus Vellum, a portly man with a jade seal hanging from his neck. "Your Grace, we are here under royal mandate," she said, presenting the scroll bearing King Emmerich's signature. "By the statute of unconditional liberation, any bond of servitude without lawful consent is null. Release your detained workers, grant them safe lodging, and ensure they may choose their new homes." Vellum's brow furrowed as he read the decree, then brightened. "You have my full cooperation, Commissioner Rosethorn. We will release them at once." He rang a silver bell, and within moments half a dozen shackled laborers, coal-blackened and gaunt, were marched into view, shields raised to protect them from the curious crowd. Soldiers removed monocles, and the freed men and women embraced trembling twins, wove through the throng to find distant cousins, or simply knelt in silent prayer. Arya stepped forward, voice firm yet gentle. "You are free. This bay now belongs to you." She handed each a small cloth pouch containing sovereigns and a signed voucher for rations and lodging. One man, his arms covered in burn scars, looked up at her with tears in his eyes. "I thought the world had forgotten me," he whispered. "Thank you." Leonardo slung an arm around her shoulders. "Your song reached every shore. Now your justice will follow." 2. The Rebellion of the Salt Marshes. Word of the statute's enforcement reached far beyond the orderly streets of Blackwater Bay. 2 days later, as the commission journeyed north through the salt marshes, they encountered a rebellion. A makeshift barricade of driftwood and fishing boats blocked the marsh road. At its center stood Rowan Silverhook Trevelyan, a famed privateer who had once trafficked freed sailors into indentured service. Now his face was haggard, his once elegant coat faded and torn. "Commissioner Rosethorn," he called from atop a pile of crates, his voice booming like a thunderclap. "You and your king's writ have trampled on my shore. These marsh folk earn their binds through dues and debts from fair contracts. I demand you annul your decree or watch me torch this entire region." Arya fixed him with calm eyes. These people were enslaved, not bound by contracts. Any agreement made under duress is null and void. Show me your ledgers and your wills freely signed. Rowan sneered and produced a meticulously kept ledger. Each indebted sailor's name was penned beside a promise to work 3 years in exchange for passage, yet each bore a forged mark and cross. Soldiers from Mayor Saul's contingent seized the book. Leonardo leaned closer to Rowan. Your privateer days are over. Paragraph 12 of the statute specifically bars signatures obtained under false pretenses. You will dismantle your operation and cooperate with the Crown's inquiry. Furious, Rowan drew a cutlass and charged, but Fallon intercepted with a fluid draw of his twin blades. In moments, Rowan struggled on the ground, disarmed but unbroken. Arya crouched beside him. You can help us rectify this wrong. Show me every person you've found, every hidden underage crew, every forged document. Do this, and your sentence will be lenient. The privateer spat salt water at her boot but nodded. I will. For the sake of the marsh folk. He gave a curt salute, and Fallon escorted him east to a provisional crown holding. That evening, around the Commission's campfire, Arya listened as freed marsh workers told stories of broken ribs and endless rowing, of storms weathered in darkness. Each tale made her song rise in volume and depth, forging the steel of her resolve anew. 3. The Eastern Reaches and Council in Brighthold. By week's end, the caravan reached Brighthold, a verdant coastal city famed for its shipyards and arcane academies. There, Lady Chancellor Evelyn Moonscribe convened a special council in the Azure Pavilion, its floors tiled with glowing runes and windows of enchanted glass that shifted through the spectrum of dawn. Scholars, captains, and captives alike gathered to debate the statute's wider implications. Arya presented the Commission's findings: 500 freed captives repatriated, 3 harbor masters arrested for complicity, 12 privateers indicted, and an entire mountain village liberated. After discovering a hidden trafficking cell in their minds, she spoke of forging a network of safe houses along trade routes, of setting up vocational schools for freed laborers, and of drafting apprenticeship charters that protected consent. The Chancellor rose, robes whispering like wind in reeds. The Mages Conclave will lend their craft to these safe houses, warding glyphs against enslavement magic, negotiating transport sigils for swift passage, and creating luminous beacons that signal refuge. The assembled murmured in awe. Fallon stepped forward. I volunteer to oversee the scouting of each route, to ensure no rogue captain or hidden band stands in the way. He saluted, an unusual formality for a ranger, and Arya felt pride shimmer through the arcane pavilion's runic glow. That night, they celebrated beneath a vaulted ceiling of starlit glass. Captives danced to Arya's singing, weaving ribbons of silk around lampposts. Leonardo stood beside her, watching as the freed children chased glowing sprites conjured by Moonscribe's apprentices. Once, we risked everything just to set foot on sovereign soil, he said softly. Now these fields ring with laughter. Arya pressed the ebony wing pendant to her heart. This is the harvest of freedom's song. 4. The journey home and the promise of tomorrow. As spring ripened toward summer, the Commission's caravan turned back toward Ardennia, trailing a mosaic of liberated souls, former shipwrights, seamstresses, stonemasons, bakers, scholars, and artisans, each gifted a letter of passage and a modest grant from the Crown's new fund for reintegration. Governor Vellum officiated in Blackwater Bay, Lady Fairfax hosted a banquet in Willowmere, and young Helene Montclair, a freed child soldier, received a scholarship at Moonridge Academy. All signatures on the living ledger of redemption. Arya took her final leave of the caravan at Ardenia's western gate. Leonardo, Faelen, and Roderick had escorted her across nearly half the kingdom, but each had duties to fulfill, Leonardo to oversee the fund's allocation, Faelen to patrol newly established free trails, and Roderick to memorialize every tale in an archival chronicle. They met one last time at the Terrace of Echoes, a cliffside overlook where the breeze carried voices like distant chorales. Arya's voice rose, drawing out a melody of farewell and reunion. Leonardo stepped forward, catching her hand. "I have one more gift for you," he said, unveiling a slender chain woven of silver and gold. Upon it hung a ring of rubies shaped like a heart. "You led us through darkness into dawn. Wear this promise, my love, my loyalty, forever." Tears sparkled in Arya's eyes. "And you," she whispered, "are the wings beneath my song." She clasped the ring to her heart. Faelen bowed, black feathered cloak swirling around him. "I ride north to secure the mountain passes. The trails will be free, but I remain ever vigilant." Roderick held a large tome bound in ironwood. "I will chart these pages for history, the Songbird of Silverlight, the Windermere Crest, the Ranger's Vigil, and the Exile's Redemption." He offered Arya the tome's first page, which bore a gilded verse penned in her own hand. "From chains of dead to dawn's embrace, we journeyed night through storm and strife. In every freed and tearful face, we found a song, the gift of life." Arya pressed the verse to her lips. "Then let us part with hope, for tomorrow needs our wings." As the sun rose over Ardenia's ramparts, they embraced, no longer bound by fear or debt, but united in purpose. Their paths would diverge, yet the melody they had forged would carry them forward, a living testament that even the smallest voice, backed by courage and conviction, could transform the darkest chains into the brightest flight. And so ended this chapter of their saga, but the world laid before them like a blank page, waiting for the next refrain of freedom's song. The morning sun touched the spires of Ardenia's citadel with pale gold as Commissioner Arya Rosethorn stood upon the grand balcony overlooking the Plaza of Statues. Below, the flags of the Statute of Unconditional Liberation snapped in the breeze, their interlocking wings shining in the light. Across town, the Crown Commission's offices hummed with activity, scribes copying translated serfs for life charters into every region's legal codex, envoys issuing safe passage scrolls to freed captives, and Crown tax inspectors arranging relief grants for families torn apart by trafficking. Yet despite the triumphs of the past month, a final darkness remained unvanquished. Rumors drifted to the citadel that a shadow network still operated in the border marches, Marisal's last loyal lieutenants, organized by a cunning man known only as the Broker. He had eluded capture, trading in both labor and illicit magic, using enchanted shackles that resisted any attempt at dissolution. Arya drew her cloak tighter against the morning chill, Leonardo Windermere at her side. Fa Ellen Gray and Roderick Gray stood just behind them, maps and ledgers in hand. "Your Majesty has approved a special commission," Leonardo explained, voice low. "We are to lead an expedition across the Marcher Hills to root out the brokers' operation once and for all. We depart at dusk manned by Crown troops and volunteers from the freed battalions." Arya's heart beat with determined fervor. "Then let us ride. We cannot leave a single chain unbroken." Before they could descend to the courtyard, Lady Chancellor Evelyn Moonscribe arrived, her robe stitched with silvery runes. "Commissioner, I bring word from the Mages' Conclave. They have identified the broker's stronghold, an abandoned mining shaft beneath the Black Rock Ridge. They will supply warding glyphs to neutralize his enchanted chains." Arya nodded gratefully. "Your aid will turn the tide." The Chancellor pressed into Arya's hand a narrow vial of pale blue liquid. "This is Aether's Tear, a catalytic essence that, when poured over any iron or steel, dissolves all trace of magical binding. Use it sparingly." Later that day, the company mustered in the Citadel's stables, 36 mounted knights of the Crown, 2 wheeled carts carrying provisions, and 50 survivors now trained as Crown Rangers. Arya and Leonardo moved through the ranks, offering words of encouragement. "Your freedom is our cause, together we forge tomorrow's safety, no one left behind." When dusk fell, the banners were lifted, the gates swung open, and the long column wound out of Ardennia, torches flickering like fireflies across the dark plain. The Marcher Hills and the Siege of Black Rock Ridge. 2 days of hard riding carried them across rolling hills dotted with scrub oak and limestone outcrops. Fa Ellen led the vanguard, scouts skirting the convoy's flanks for ambushes. Roderick studied the maps by lantern light, cross-journaling the convoy's path. Leonardo brought up the rear with Arya, where she walked beside wounded survivors riding in the supply cart. She offered them water, blankets, and, most importantly, her promise, "Once we end this, you are free to choose your path, new trades, new lives, new homes." On the third night, they reached the gaping maw of the old Black Rock mine, a yawning shaft carved into the ridge's eastern face. A century ago, it had produced lead and silver, now its abandoned tracks served as the broker's clandestine forge. At its mouth stood 3 crude barricades of wood and slag, guarded by half-starved men in tattered uniforms. As the torches approached, Chief Ranger Anselm called out, "State your business." Leonardo stepped forward, voice amplified by the stalwart walls. "I am Commissioner Arya Rosethorn of the Crown Commission. By royal edict, you are to surrender at once. Any who yield will be pardoned, those who resist will be treated as enemies of the realm." A grizzled soldier spat into the dust. "We have chains to guard, not men. You'd do well to leave before the broker's wrath falls upon you." Before Leonardo could reply, Arya lifted her voice clear and unwavering. "My wrath is justice, and my mercy is freedom. Any man here who has suffered false bondage knows my cause. I am your ally." A hush fell. From the deepest darkness of the mine's entrance, a figure emerged, a tall man draped in charcoal robes, his face hidden beneath a hood. He carried a wickedly curved dagger at his waist and bore no weapon save the swirling runes carved along his staff. When he spoke, his voice was silk over steel. "I am known as the Broker. You come to free the captive and save the innocent. But tell me, Arya Rosethorn, when you freed yourself, did you ever wonder why a songbird remains behind its cage until someone dares to open the door?" Arya's chest tightened, but her gaze never wavered. "I sing because beyond the cage lies a world that must hear my truth. And if the key is freedom, I will forge it myself." The Broker laughed, a sound like rattling chains. "Then enter my domain and see if your conviction can withstand the echoes of those you could not save." He backed into the shaft, and his guards closed in behind him, the barricade slamming shut. 2. The descent into shadows. The company formed up before the sealed mine. Leonardo drew his rapier. "We storm the barricades. Once inside, we must stay together. Faelen, find the warding runes in the ceiling, disable them so Aether's tear can work." Roderick distributed flasks of the tear to the front ranks. "A drop per chain link," he instructed. "Know your targets." The barricades splintered under the charge of the Crown Rangers. Torches streamed into the shaft, revealing a rickety network of tracks and timber supports. The air reeked of oil and iron, and the walls glowed with veins of black ore. As they moved deeper, the shaft narrowed, and clusters of glowing runes writhed on the beams overhead, warding sigils that hummed with binding magic. Faelen scaled a support pillar, drawing his dagger and scraping at the glyphs. With each crack in the rune, the oppressive hum dimmed. Meanwhile, Arya followed a distant cry of despair, a captive woman chained to a rail. A pair of guards watched over her, gleaming shackles binding her wrists. Arya hurried forward. "Hold!" She raised her hand, and the guards froze, awestruck by her presence. "This woman is free." She uncorked a vial of Aether's tear and poured it over the iron cuffs. The metal hissed and melted like wax in a candle's flame, dropping away in red-hot rivulets. The freed woman fell to her knees, sobbing, and embraced Arya's ankle. Leonardo and a squad cleared the way, and the rescue rippled through the shaft. Torchlight revealed dozens more captives, artisans forced to craft chainmail links, children shoveling ore, elders shackled to their carts. Each chain was dissolved in turn by Arya's tear or the careful strikes of Faelen's blades. But at the end of the main tunnel, they encountered the Broker once more, surrounded by his lieutenants, mages in tatters, their staffs crackling with residual energy. With a flourish of his staff, the Broker unleashed a wave of arcane force that sent knights tumbling. Lightning blue energy arced off the timber supports, raining sparks. Arya leapt forward, staff in hand. "Your magic binds no more." She unfolded her voice into a war song that surged through the shaft, bolstered by the freed captives who added their own voices in chorus. The walls trembled as the song's power clashed with the Broker's wards. Leonardo charged. Steel sung against enchanted steel as he closed with the Broker's lead lieutenant. Fa-Elin dodged past another guard, striking the final runes overhead to silence the channeling magic. With a crack like thunder, the arcane locks shattered. Arya raised the last vial of Aether's tear and cast it at the broker's staff. The enchanted wood disintegrated in a flash of light, and the staff's magic dissipated into hollow air. The broker staggered, his robes fizzling where the tear's essence touched. Seizing the moment, Leonardo disarmed him with a decisive warding slash. The broker sank to one knee, eyes wild. You cannot undo every chain," he snarled. Roderick stepped forward, rapier at the broker's throat. "You have undone more than you know." He gestured to the freed captives, who knelt in rows behind Arya. Arya pressed her palm against the broker's hood. "Remember every face you claimed. Remember the songs you silenced. And know that today, your legacy ends." She issued a final decree: "By royal authority, I strip you of all titles and lands. You are hereby sentenced to labor in the same mines you enchanted. No magic, no clemency until every debt of suffering is repaid." The king's warrant was read aloud by a herald, and the broker's howled protest faded against the rising chant of liberated voices. 3. The Dawn Covenant and the Wings of Tomorrow. At dawn's first light, the rescued captives emerged blinking into the open air, led by Arya and her companions. The mines, once a tomb of steel and sorcery, were bathed in sunlight, and the air tasted of salt and ivy. Free at last, artisans and elders, parents and children gathered at the ridge crest to watch the sun rise, their voices lifted in a hymn that wove threads of relief, remembrance, and renewal. Leonardo wrapped an arm around Arya's waist. "You freed more souls today than ever before." She laid her head on his shoulder. "And still, I sing for the world that waits beyond these hills." Fa-Elin and Roderick joined them, eyes shining with pride and purpose. Fa-Elin's hand rested on his bow, an oak-carved tribute to every path he had cleared. Roderick carried the final volume of the Ledger of Blackrock, now bound in new leather and inscribed with gold, "The chains of Blackrock Ridge all freed." A crown herald arrived, bearing a sealed scroll. Arya broke the wax, a royal proclamation extending the statute's protections to every enchanted collar in the realm, including the demon-binding shackles of the Wormwood, the veil chains of the Moonlit Sisters, and the binding rings of the Celestial Forge. It was a covenant between crown and citizen, a pledge that no soul could henceforth be bartered, cursed, or compelled against their will. Under that covenant, Arya Rosethorn stood amid the legions of the newly freed, her voice and spirit joined by thousands. Above them, the sky brightened as though in blessing, and the winds carried the echoes of chains shattering like distant thunder. Though her odyssey had spanned brothel walls, mountain passes, and royal courts, Arya knew her song would never truly end. Wherever shadows lurked and hearts hungered for freedom, she would raise her voice. For in every liberated breath, in every reclaimed life, the melody of liberty would soar on silver wings, an everlasting anthem to the dawn of a kinder, braver world. The morning sun poured gold through the arched windows of the newly refurbished Citadel Hall, illuminating fresh tapestries depicting the rise of the Statute of Unconditional Liberation. Commissioner Arya Rosethorn stood at the head of a long polished oaken table, where guild masters, magistrates, clergy, and freed captains gathered in solemn assembly. Leonardo Windermere, at her left hand, watched the room filled with hope and determination. Ellen Grey and Roderick Grey flanked Arya, each bearing scrolls, the final records of the Blackrock Ridge operation and the broker's downfall. Friends and allies, Arya began, her voice steady with conviction, we have shattered the chains that bound our people. Yet our work is not complete. Today, we must lay the foundations of the institutions that will guard freedom's flame for generations to come. She gestured to the first scroll, bearing the seal of crown and commission alike. This is the charter of the Guild's Accord, she announced. Under its terms, every guild craftsman, healers, merchants, seafarers will swear an oath to uphold fair labor practices, no forced service, no debt bondage, no secret penalties. Master Weaver Elspeth of the Tailors Consortium rose, tears gleaming in her eyes. We pledge our looms, our workshops, and our apprenticeships to the service of liberty. Any breach of this covenant will cost us our gilded symbols. Let fairness be our finest thread. She dipped her quill in silver ink and signed, followed by one stunned guild after another, the Ironmongers, the Shipwrights, the Bakers' League, and the Stonecutters' Circle. Next came the Charter of Safe Havens, provisions for a network of sanctuaries along every major route, funded by a levy on crown profits from public lands. Here, Lady Chancellor Evelyn Moonscribe and Admiral Rowena Silverheart affixed their seals, ensuring the Mages' Conclave would ward each refuge against coercion magic, while the West Fleet would patrol coastal paths to escort refugees safely. At Arya's side, Leonardo signed the Charter of Reintegration, guaranteeing freed captives vocational training, access to loans for starting businesses, and legal assistance in land claims or peddlers. Permits. The city of Ardenea will allocate space in the western quarter for new workshops and homes, rent-free for the first 3 years, he proclaimed. Ellen presented the Rangers' Wards Charter, establishing the Crown Rangers as guardians of the mountain passes, marsh roads, and hidden trails, paths once used to smuggle captives into slavery. We will bend every bow and sharpen every blade to protect the innocent, he swore, his dark eyes catching the morning light. Finally, Roderick stepped forward with the teller's decree, a codified record of every witness testimony, every ledger entry, every recovered chain link. This archive, housed in the Citadel's Grand Library, will stand as a testament to our triumph and a warning to any who would traffic in human misery. One by one, the hall's participants signed. At last, Arya took the quill. When her name touched the parchment, the assembled crowd erupted in heartfelt applause and a spontaneous chorus of free and fair. Outside, drums sounded the hour across Ardenea, echoing down every lane and waking the city to the promise of a new era. That evening, Arya and Leonardo walked the ramparts as sunset bled across the sky. Below, the city's wards glowed with lantern light, workshops in motion, apprentices hammering at anvils, children carrying satchels to newly opened schools, and freed families gathering for communal feasts. Goblets clinked in taverns, but there was no revelry of excess, only quiet gratitude and the murmur of plans for tomorrow. Leonardo slipped his arm around Arya's waist. Look at what we've built together. She rested her head against his chest. A foundation unbreakable as the chains we shattered, yet fragile as the trust we must nurture. He kissed her temple. Together, we'll keep it strong. Beneath them, the banners of the covenant fluttered in the night breeze, white for peace, gold for hope, and the interlocking wings of freedom soaring against the dark. Years passed, and Commissioner Arya Rosethorn's legacy became woven into the very fabric of the realm. Wherever forced labor once thrived in city slums, coastal docks, mountain camps, the new statutes shone as beacons of justice. The Guild's accord matured into a respected council that met annually in Ardennia, while the mages' conclave's warding glyphs became standard protections in every town's boundary stones. Arya's voice, once confined to a brothel's shadowed walls, now echoed in royal halls, collegiate amphitheaters, and open-air forums. She composed anthems for every major milestone, the charter's signing, the first freed marriage under the new laws, and the opening of the Lighthouse Academy for freed children where Leonardo taught lessons in civic duty, and Faelen led field exercises in wilderness survival. Roderick's Chronicles, bound in volumes known as the Annals of Liberation, found their place on every library's shelves. On the 10th anniversary of the Statute's proclamation, Ardennia's Plaza of Statutes was reborn as the Square of Wings. A grand obelisk carved with depictions of chains breaking and birds ascending rose at its center, crowned by a metal sculpture of interlocked wings. Commissioners, guild masters, and citizens from across the realm gathered for the unveiling. Arya, now known as the Wing-Bearer, stood at the obelisk's base, Leonardo at her side, their children twins named Harmony and Valor clutching her skirts. In her hand, she held the leather-bound ledger that had begun her journey, pages worn, ink smeared, names once forgotten now celebrated. She placed it in a glass case encircling the obelisk's base, a symbol that memory must never fade. When she raised her voice in the ceremonial song, thousands joined, freed captives who had become scholars and artisans, rangers and marshals who had pledged their blades to protect the humble, and even distant governors who had adopted Ardennia's statutes in their provinces. The melody rose and fell like the wind, carrying the promise that as long as a single voice dared to sing for justice, tyranny could never take hold. As the final chord rang out, Arya closed her eyes, feeling the harmony of 1,000 souls. In that moment, she heard not only her own song, but the chorus of every life set free, every chain dissolved, every heart reborn. And she knew the story would continue, written in new ledgers, in new charters, in every child who learned that freedom is both a right and a responsibility. Turning to Leonardo, she whispered, "Our song never ends." He smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "And wherever it goes, I'll follow." Faelen and Roderick joined them, their faces lined with age but alight with the same fierce hope of their first steps beyond the brothel's walls. Together, they watched the sunset over Ardennia's spires, knowing that though their journey had reached this milestone, the melody of liberation would carry on, rising on the wings of tomorrow, forever. Free. Title: Songbird of Silverlight, A Chronicle of Liberation. Description: in a realm where human lives are bartered like commodities, orphan singer Arya Rosethorn finds herself trapped in the infamous Silverlight brothel. When a chance encounter with Lord Leonardo Windermere ignites a spark of hope, Arya's voice becomes the clarion call of freedom. From storm-tossed marshes to the gilded halls of Ardenia's king, she forges a crown commission to dismantle trafficking rings, shatter enchanted chains, and rewrite the laws of the land. Joined by the ranger Vaelin Grey and the redeemed exile Roderick Grey, Arya's journey spans brothel walls, mountain passes, and royal courts, culminating in a new covenant that guarantees liberty and justice for all. A sweeping fantasy of courage, redemption, and the unbreakable power of one song.